bracket.
Of course, Daniel looking to capitalize off the last win that he had in the losers bracket and be moving forward, but is going to have to take down Sebastian to do so. So Sebastian, a fantastic competitor. We're seeing that top 16 in the Lima Regionals, as well as a champion in the mid-season showdown and a top 8, top 16 to boot. With a well-rounded team, we're seeing that Landers again, we're seeing that Registeel that we loved so much, and a Spectre that we just got to witness put in so much work in the last game. And this is all going to be rounded out with that Galarian Moltres, a Grimmsnarl, and a Regieleki.
Registeel's been making a whole lot of appearances, and while we're looking at two teams with the Registeel on, just looking across the regions at where it really became popular coming into this tournament, it's actually Europe the most. This is when we expand out a little bit. The Registeel was bought by 30 players in Europe into their region qualifiers, but not far behind is Latin America with 24. There's a big old gap down to North America with 15 and only 2 in Oceania, so both Europe and Latin America kind of on the same wavelength when it comes to this Registeel. They're always paired up with something like the Landorus to help out. The supporting teams outside of that, though, very, very different. There is a similar in Spectriate as well. So you've got a consistent 3, and then, the Grimmsnarl's a little different. I don't think the G-Max is a big factor. Then you've got an electric type, and the big difference, the Venusaur and the Moltres. So really interesting matchup to see how they go. See if one player can run away with it. But they're all built very, very similarly. We all kind of know exactly how they play out. They're always going to be looking to body press, iron defense, and keep themselves safe with protect. The only difference comes in between the Sand Tomb and Amnesia, really. So always looking to do the same thing. And once you've figured it out, you just got to execute it better than your opponent in the Registeel Mirror.
I mean, we keep talking about differences, but we haven't brought out the biggest difference yet in that Rotom Heat. So Rotom Heat especially can apply so much pressure with those overheats and such, or a Max Flare, and definitely not something that Registeel necessarily appreciates. So I'm really excited to see if that's brought, or what it could potentially be doing in this match.
I like the presence of the Rotom Heat. It applies some good pressure to the Moltres as well, which is different. Of course, applies pressure to the Registeel, so it could be quite impactful, and is able to avoid something like the Max Quake from the Landorus, which would usually take it out. The Regieleki over on Sebastian's side, not able to do that, so does have to be a little bit careful. We can ruminate on it as much as we like, talk about what we think might happen, but the best thing to do is take a look at what will happen as we head on over into the game. So this is another one that will keep your tournament life alive. We'll be watching from Sebastian's point of view. A very fashionable choice, I'd like to point out, from his opponent, Daniel, there.
I mean, keeping up with the fashion, Sebastian has a Grimmsnarl of his own next to the Galarian Moltres, facing down against that Spectre and Grimmsnarl. So a little bit of a more passive start with these Grimmsnarls, looking to potentially be setting up to be providing more longevity in the long game here.
These Grimmsnarls have been ever present in another format. They've been all over the place, and some trainers have been really able to carve out good advantages with them. So I like that, they've been looking at it and seeing just what an impactful choice having a strictly supportive Pokemon can be in your teams. The big thing here, though, is Sebastian really just gets to set up Moltres if he wants. I don't see an easy way for that Moltres to be slowed down. So definitely in a position to try and capitalize on that.
Sebastian also just looking to slow down Daniel's Spectre here, which means with the speed drop, this Moltres is going to get the opportunity to fire off a Fiery Wrath here, dealing a lot of damage to the Spectre before getting to fire off a Snarl of its own. Critical hit on Moltres. Not that that matters. What's more important is the special attack drop that's going to be going through onto the Moltres to try and slow it down. And further slowing things down, Daniel going for a Spirit Break onto Sebastian's Grimmsnarl.
That Spirit Break doing a whole lot of damage, and really easy to see why a lot of people are packing that on the Grimmsnarl. By a lot of people, I mean of all the players who bought Grimmsnarl to Players Cup 4, 99% of them had Spirit Break available, and 2 players decided against it. So it's always going to be there, and as you can see, can apply a decent little threat. While on the subject of Grimmsnarls, I do think that actually Sebastian's might have been a little more impactful there with the Thunder Wave, just able to make sure that Spectre took damage not just in the first turn, but in the second turn as well. Even after the Snarl, not enough. So this Moltres kind of just trying to run away with the game here.
Yeah, being able to limit what the Spectre can do is so impactful, and despite the Snarl the Moltres being able to pick up that KO, but Daniel firing off with a Spirit Break yet again into the Grimmsnarl, so trading Pokemon here, but that Grimmsnarl being able to do what it wanted to do. It got to set up a Reflect, it got the opportunity to go for the Thunder Wave onto the Spectre, and definitely put in its work.
That's a trade I think is in Sebastian's favor. Just being able to take away something like the Spectre, which can cause a lot of problems. Yes, you're leaving the Grimmsnarl up, and that's not great either, but you get a screen up in exchange, which Daniel hasn't done yet, and that's something he may have to look for in the last couple turns with his own Grimmsnarl.
Of course, now these Pokemon are facing down against the Registeel, the one Pokemon we talk about so much, facing off against the other standout Landorus, but at least this Landorus is slowed down with the Reflect that Sebastian was able to put up last turn.
It's going to be a really big help, and knowing what your opponent has available in the back really helps you make a decision. When you're only able to get one of these screens up, you've got to make sure it's the right one. Now, we hadn't seen a Dynamax from either trainer in this game. It looks like that is changing on this turn as Moltres realizes just how important it can be as a win condition, even after that earlier Snarl.
Yeah, well, even with his special attack boost, being able to go for the speed. We haven't seen the Airstream game today, but I mean, Moltres looking to start it off as Daniel takes the opportunity to set up a light screen to further reduce the amount of damage this Moltres is going to be doing, but still picking up a nice little amount onto the Landorus, but more importantly, that speed boost onto itself and to its partner Registeel.
The Registeel loving the speed boost every single time. Landorus, though, not Dynamaxing, and was waiting to see exactly what it did in response, and that's why you don't Dynamax immediately. You want to get that Swords Dance in play. But the Registeel now managing to set up an Iron Defense. That's also going to be behind that earlier Reflect. So for any physical attacks, that is going to be a nightmare to try and take down. Now, this does put Sebastian kind of one turn ahead in the Max Airstream Mirror game, and kind of forces a Max Airstream to come through soon from something like Daniel's Landorus to try and level this one up when it comes to controlling the speed.
I love the contrast with this match in comparison to the last one. Both of the players playing a little more slow, looking to be setting up. Of course, there's the Iron Defense to help it against the Landorus, but the Landorus looking for that Sword Dance for that nice attack boost in the face of this Registeel and the earlier Reflect. And now that it has a nice, healthy attack, is going to take the opportunity to go for a Dynamax.
You got to get the attack up to make sure you can deal with that Reflect. So getting that turn off pretty much freely, probably very, very important for Daniel in being able to swing this game back in his kind of favor. There's a lot's been going Sebastian's way with not much response. I like that the Grimmsnarl has stuck around and set up both screens too.
Of course, being able to stick around, it can just keep setting up those screens and just further prove to be a pain on the field, having the opportunity to set up both, where Sebastian only got to do the Reflect, which, to be fair, is the more important one here. Sebastian does go for the Airstream, which means this Registeel is starting to get super speedy and taking the opportunity to just go for another Iron Defense. Landorus, though, trying to fire back, not going to play the Airstream game, but instead trying to deal with this Registeel before it gets out of control, firing off a super effective Max Quake, but even with the attack boost, all of this defense boost is just putting in the work and only takes about half of its health.
I think that's a good trade, though. I mean, the amount of time Registeel's had to set up Iron Defenses, and of course that Reflect, you'll take that as the Landorus. Your special defense boost also helping out against the Moltres in its final turn of Dynamax. And Daniel looking to kind of accept that I've lost this Airstream war, you are going to be quicker than me, but I think I'd rather spend some time just being able to land special defense boost and set up. The Grimmsnarl being taken off the field now, probably feeling like it's a little bit low impact, and I love this selection. The Rotom, as we talked about earlier, really good against both the Registeel and, of course, that Moltres. I mean, the Registeel hasn't got much in the way of special defense assistance, and this Rotom could be able to just take advantage of that.
Of course, it's spending all of the turns setting up the Iron Defense, but Rotom hitting on the special attacking means it doesn't care about this at all as well. It just hits so impactful with those overheats. And Landorus looking to start getting those Airstream boosts, boosting up the speed on the Rotom as well here, and dealing a good amount of damage back, but unfortunately giving Moltres the Berserk boost as well.
This Moltres is going to be quite scary, a little less scary. Now its Dynamax turns are going to be ending, but the Berserk boost means it's still going to have an impact. Don't forget, its special attack was dropped earlier on by the Snarl, so not getting too crazy, but the damage going back up in this final turn. I think, being able to throw out a big Fiery Wrath could be important here, but it still has to contest with the fact that Daniel set up both screens, and this Landorus has been taking these hits very, very well. Just look how little damage that does behind the light screen. Max Airstream coming back in return.
Yeah, Airstream's coming out into the Moltres, finally picking it off despite it not doing too much damage regardless. You don't want that bird sticking around and just proving to be a pain. And with that, it did get the Fire Wrath flinch onto the Rotom, which at least gives this Registeel the opportunity to fire off a really strong body press into the Rotom. Doesn't pick up the KO, but does deal a lot of damage.
That Rotom surprisingly acting like a bit of a tank there, being able to take that body press nice and comfortably. The flinch, huge, would have been able to throw out a big overheat at something like this Registeel, and that's, a bit of a loss. But 2 Max Airstreams now, connecting and getting that Rotom into a good position. What's most important here, though, is those double screens have just been so impactful for the side of Daniel. Having both Reflect and Light Screen has left Sebastian with very few options in how to find these knockouts. And that Landorus sat there and took hits all 3 turns of its Dynamax and is still sitting on the field, not even down into the red yet.
And Landorus not one to be outdone and can still offer so much. It has the 2 Airstream boosts and it has that earlier Sword Stance, so definitely a way to be putting pressure on this field. But the Spectre looking to maybe try and get some pressure as well. I mean, both the Daniel's Pokemon, the Landorus isn't in the red, but it is still pretty low. But the Rotom, not wanting to go down, goes for the Protect instead, as this Landorus goes for the Earthquake into Sebastian, Spectre, and Registeel, and picking up the KO onto the Spectre.
Yeah, that Spectre not able to take it, not the bulkiest Pokemon. Don't forget that Landorus is still sticking around with those Swords Dance boosts, so really struggling even to deal with something like the Reflect. The Landorus, though, in exchange, will be taken out by this Registeel. Fair trade, I think. Landorus has done all it needs to do, and all the options to deal with this Registeel are just on the field. He only needs that one option, and its name is Rotom.
Yeah, the Rotom's definitely a little low, but I mean, it only needs to just go for that one overheat and connect. And Grimmsnarl on the field to boot is definitely annoying. I mean, Registeel doesn't have access to spread attacks. It only has that body press, so it's definitely a little tricky. And Rotom, of course, having the Airstream boost, gets to go first in the turn and cleans up this Registeel to take this first game.
Really well played, really good board management there from Daniel, and we get to see the impact of just having double screens up, the Light Screen and Reflect, to cover both special and regular defense. Just so good and so impactful, limiting the options, particularly that Moltres. I think the Moltres was going to, try and run away with the game even after the drop earlier on from Snarl. But the Light Screen came up at the perfect time, and that Landorus was able to take those hits, take a couple of Airstreams, get all of the Airstreams that it needed back. It didn't need all 3, only needed the 2 onto the side of its own to try and get there, and a special defense boost as well. So really well played there by Daniel. I think both trainers really going at it, really thinking about their board position, but even setting up the Registeel just wasn't enough, and that Rotom really huge in the way it came in and dealt with the Registeel comfortably.
Yeah, Registeel can run away with an endgame, but not as something as scary as a Rotom sitting on the other side of the field. And like you said, only 2 Airstream boosts. So the first turn of Max going for that Max Quake to raise his special defense was so nice, especially knowing that he only needed 2 Airstreams to be outspeeding the 3 onto the Registeel, which, I mean, in that endgame, it just meant that Overheat got to connect and just pick up that win. So it's time to get into this game 2 to see how the players are going to be adjusting and hopefully see our favorite Rotom back in action.
It was really important, and this is another game here in Players Cup 4. I can't stress enough how important speed control is. Using those max airstreams from both sides, just really, really, really important when it comes to dealing with an endgame board situation as well. So a lot of thinking coming in from both of these trainers in how they navigate the middle turns of this game, really, and to make sure that they've got the speed for an end game that allows them to win and secure it.
Yeah, the mid-game is where the adjustments look like they're going to be made, as both of the players started with the same lead here. These Grimmsnarls facing each other down with the Spectre on Daniel's side and Moltres. That was very impactful, but just couldn't do enough in the first game with that Moltres.
Wasn't able to get quite enough knockouts, and its Berserk boost came through just a fraction too late. No Thunderwave this time, though, as Spectre maybe trying to set up a little bit more with a couple more Snarls.
Yeah, the Snarl does get the special attack boost to boot, which means it's not going to be taking nearly as much as it did in the last game, where the Fire Wrath got to go off first. But Sebastian looking to apply some more pressure and Spirit Breaking instead into Daniel's Grimmsnarl. Seeing the impact the screens had the first time around, maybe looking to try and put that pressure on and take it out, though it is going to take a Spirit Break in return.
As Grimmsnarl's going at it with the Spirit Break, both kind of respecting each other as a potential threat and just deciding to try and get rid of them, knowing about the screens. Because Grimmsnarls, could be trading just with each other and saying, all right, well, we're not going to even try the screens. We'll just try and knock each other out. We're kind of the Spectre and the Moltres go back and forth a little bit over here. But no Thunderwave towards that Spectre, and meant it got the Snarl in before the Moltres' Fiery Wrath and was able to do a whole lot more just by having that down, and is looking significantly healthier this time around.
Yeah, and being able to keep going for the Snarls as well and getting that first one, it means the Spectre will be most likely able to stick around for a third term of causing chaos if it wants to, especially now that Daniel's taken the opportunity to set up the late screen before things get a little too out of hand with Sebastian's Grimmsnarl. Daniel, of course, going for yet another Snarl, so this Moltres, which can be so impactful and so dangerous, now sitting at a -2 special attack, but it's not going to stop it. Going for the Fiery Wrath, just picking up a little bit of chip damage along the way, but at least Sebastian gets this opportunity, get the Spirit Break into Daniel's Grimmsnarl and taking it out with only one screen set up.
This is Daniel probably using the information that he picked up in game number 1, though, realizing that a lot of Sebastian's team was based around these special attackers, the Moltres being very, very important. Of course, the Spectre towards the end of the game is an option for him. Just saying special attackers aren't allowed to play the game anymore. A light screen going up before the reflect, kind of that last thing you can set up is that one screen. You've got to pick it so carefully, and those Snarls consistently coming through. I mean, this Moltres is going to be able to do such a small amount of damage over the next couple turns. Just has to be careful, and it looks like Sebastian has established that special attackers are not the way. He's going to have to play the game a little bit differently this time around.
Yep, but first, starting it off, Daniel's looking to swap out that Spectre as well. I mean, 2 Snarls, being able to bring down that Moltres. Spectre has done what it's wanted to do. So the Rotom's hitting the field, and Landorus coming out on Sebastian's end for the Intimidate onto Daniel's Landorus, which is definitely going to be appreciated here. And, I mean, here's the max.
It's got to be time to start setting up. Now the Grimmsnarls have kind of done their bit. They've contributed. They've either switched out or been knocked out. It's really a tough situation. What's very, very strange about this is the Moltres has been snarled a couple of times. Does have options, Moltres, to try and recover from those snarls. Definitely has access to Nasty Plot, so not trying to set that up before going for the Dynamax in your max moves. And these max moves are going to be doing very little damage, especially not very effective max airstream into the Rotom.
Yeah, Rotom takes that easily, but at least Sebastian gets an Airstream boost, but Daniel taking the opportunity to go for an attack boost onto the Landorus, so it's not going to be oh so scary at a +2, but it is still going to be dealing out a massive amount of damage at a +1 if it chooses to do so. So Sebastian not really pressuring it too much, means Daniel has that opportunity to just start setting things up.
I'm not so sure about, committing to this Moltres, though. I mean, it's been taking so many snarls. It's just sat on the field and is also attacking into the light screen. So certainly going to struggle. Yes, the max airstream is nice. I don't think that's something that we can ignore. But if the Landorus over on Daniel's side decides to Dynamax this turn, we could see just how much more impactful it is. Particularly when, Daniel's decided to set up here's the Landorus Dynamaxing. He's decided to take that turn, set up, and then Dynamax, but Sebastian didn't, even though this Moltres has access to the Nasty Ball. So, really confident in maybe landing a critical hit, or just how much damage it can do, or just valuing that speed control even earlier on.
Yeah, last turn with things being a little more passive with the setup and a switch meant Sebastian could have set up, but valuing those airstream boosts, but instead, just going for the max darkness, realizing not really attacking for the most, so trying to get those special defense drops, but attacks into the protected Rotom. So there is the special defense drop going in, but absolutely no damage. Landorus U-turning into Daniel's Dynamax Landorus, or a U-turn out, which is nice because it does mean that has the opportunity to come back in and try and intimidate it down to slow it up.
Yeah, getting another Intimidate could be important, but the Swords Dance, making that a little bit harder work and definitely not as impactful. There's the matching of the max airstream, and just look how much more damage that does. No Reflect in play for Sebastian. The Swords Dance turn used very, very wisely from the Landorus, and it's just an obscene amount of damage to connect with onto the Moltres. Yes, it does get its boost through. Fantastic, it's got Berserk. Making up for some of those earlier snarls, but you're still down at -1.
Yeah, it's definitely a little tricky here, but at least there is a special defense drop on Daniel's side from the max darkness from last turn, but Moltres is definitely not dealing out the massive amount of damage that you would normally expect to see in Dynamax. And Registeel coming out as well. I mean, it doesn't want to be faring down against this Landorus, but also trying to be setting up or trying to deal with this Rotom.
As Rotom's got to be careful now. Like, this is one of those few Registeel that has amnesia, so if there's an opportunity to weave some of that in, it might be what you need. The Rotom, though, taking that Max Darkness so well, this Moltres just so underwhelming in these past few turns. The special defenses are down, that's great, but I'm not sure how relevant that's going to be.
Yeah, and to add to it all, Daniel with that max airstream to just clean up this Moltres, so even though the Moltres didn't really get to do much, it's going to do even less as it's taken out on its last turn of Dynamax, and unfortunately not really making too much of an impact here, and Rotom looking to make all of the impact, going for one of those overheats, brings the Registeel right down. It doesn't clean up the KO, but definitely putting this Registeel in a really dangerous position.
The Registeel trying to take advantage of the fact there's no Reflect this time and do a little more damage, but it didn't set up an Iron defense, so not really given the opportunity there to do exactly what it wanted. And now the Registeel is really up against it with a very, very low amount of health sat on its side. The Grimmsnarl can come in and help it out, throw some screens its way, maybe try and buy it a little bit of time to drop some recovery with the leftovers, weave in an Amnesia or an Iron defense to take hits a little bit better. But you've still got this last turn of the Dynamax from the Landorus where you could just get kind of cleaned up pretty quickly. The Registeel still not fast, and the Moltres kind of gave up on it a little bit, not giving it those max airstream boosts that it needs to be this terrifying threat that we see it be alongside the max airstream now.
Well, we saw in the last game that even with 3 airstream boosts, all Daniel needed was 2 on the Rotom, so maybe just recognizing, I can't win the Speed War, I gotta go for something else, and it's going to try and go for that Protect just to stick around. Doesn't want to be taking an attack to be bringing it down and get a little leftovers recovery, and as well get the opportunity to be setting up the screens. Going for the Reflect first, and it is going to go down for its trouble, so only gets to set up the 1 screen before going down to this Landorus.
Grimsnarl coming in and getting felled immediately. Yes, the reflect would have been important. It may help out in a situation late game against the Landorus, but you really have no answer now to the Rotom, even though special attack is dropped as a result of that overheat, or the Spectrier that you know is in the back and can come in and do some cleanup work as well. It's surprisingly fast. You've got to be hoping though that your Landorus can put in work, but bear in mind, the Registeel just protected. The Rotom, even at -2, would still be doing huge amounts of damage. And yes, you bring down that Landorus's attack, but after the Sword Stance, it's just back to neutral.
Yeah, at least you're out with the overheat. It's not the most accurate move, so could potentially hope for one of those infamous misses there and have the Landorus make something happen. So, never know as well. A double protect here could be absolutely huge, and we're going to see Sebastian fish for that in the end game to try and put himself in a better position to start putting some pressure back on Daniel.
You've got to buy a ticket to win the raffle, and he does not pull a winning ticket this time. Not being able to do that. The Rock Slide immediately coming over from Daniel's side, though. Minimal damage down on the Registeel. I don't really think that's the target. Just trying to take advantage of his speed, and Rotom with the overheat.
The Rock Slide didn't connect, but overheat is going to, and even at a -2, which now it's going to be a -4, is going to clean up the Registeel. And I mean, this Rotom has definitely put in massive works, even if it's going to go down for its problems.
Yeah, Rotom did exactly what it needed to do, though, and what you rightly called out before we even got into the game. It deals with the Registeel. Yes, it took 2 overheats this time, but it was never really in a position where it wasn't able to do that and was played so perfectly. Spectre comes in. It is a little bit low, but is going to be in a position to maybe just throw down a couple big attacks towards this Landorus. Landorus over on Daniel's side, taking advantage of being faster and getting out the way of any potential hits. The Shadow Ball coming through should bring this Landorus down to a good chunk, and we'll see what the Landorus can do to try and fire back.
So Sebastian's Landorus just going for the Earthquake, showing that the Spectre was the target all along. Of course, would not be able to connect with the Landorus at all, being a flying type, but at least gets one of these targets out of here to be bringing it to a 1v1 now, and does have a little bit of an advantage with the HP as well as that previous Reflect.
Does have an advantage with the health. The Reflect in play could be vital here, could be absolutely monstrous, but the speed advantage just sits so comfortably with Daniel, because that's the same Landorus that managed to throw down all of those attacks. Fly connects from Landorus over on Daniel's side, and yeah, that's going to hurt a lot.
Your Rock Slide so close to picking up this KO here, but not quite able to clean it up despite trying its best. And even through the Reflect, Life Orb Landorus on Daniel's end, just doing so much. Goes for the Rock Slide, not always the most accurate, but is going to connect here. Is going to be taking down Sebastian's Landorus, and Daniel is going to be taking it in a 2-0 despite losing his own Landorus in the end to that Life Orb. But at least picking up the win first.
You won with 0.